Hi, everybody, and welcome to Masters of I'm here with Stacey Roshan today. Stacey, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we begin, where are you in the world?
I am in Maryland, just right outside of DC.
Okay, awesome. We're going to let some examples of you using play in the background here. But tell us a bit about yourself. You work in the education space. So much has happened with teachers, educators in the last 2 years. Um, Not to be too open ended about it, but I would love to hear a little bit about your work and maybe how it's shifted a little bit as a result of the pandemic and where your role has really been influential as a sort of a kind of tech leading teacher.
Yeah, so I had started becoming really interested in tech's role in my classroom back in 2010. And really, it came from a place of me feeling like I just really, my most important work in my classroom was when I could get around to individual students and really sit with them and hear what they were thinking. And I didn't have enough time for that in a really packed AP calculus curriculum because I'm a math teacher. And so I wanted a better way. And that was when I started looking to technology and I started looking to video and I started creating video lessons to offload that very teacher directed part of class to video. So my initial goal there was like really just to have more time with students. But I started to really see the power of getting students these videos that they could watch at their own pace and that it was really customized to what the student needed so that it could totally reimagine what class time looked like. And so that was like my first journey into technology, but that's been my biggest goal ever since is how can technology really bring us closer in the classroom in terms of the connections that we can make. And then during the pandemic, everybody was relying on technology for absolutely everything. But I think that a lot of us saw the power of connection through technology. And so I've been able to work with so many more teachers in the past 2 years, way beyond the walls of just my own school building. And it's been really as hard as it's been, and it's been so challenging. I don't want to discount any of that, but I think there is beauty in what we've seen about how technology can be a tool to connect and give learners what they need to be able to access the information at their own time, at their own pace.
hmm Yeah. Um, and like, tell us a little bit more about your role because you're not in the classroom, so to speak, right? But you're advising teachers on technology. Can you say a little bit more about your role?
Yeah, I work right now at a K-12 independent school, and my role is working with teachers and also really evaluating the tech tools to make sure that school wide we're using tools that make sense, that like fall into our school's mission and that really help take our teaching to the next level. Because to me, it's always really about like that intentional use of technology into the design of our lessons. I think that's when really magical transformation can happen. In addition to that, I am a speaker, so I get to speak at a lot of conferences, and so many of them have moved to a virtual setting, which is when I started exploring because I wanted to be able to really connect with my audience and do that same type of modeling of what I was sharing. And this has been a really key tool for me in order to do that work with teachers all over the world. And it's been really, really amazing.
So, Stacey, tell us a little bit about how you came into and how you've been using it, and for how long.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when I started using it. I was in beta and I saw it and I was like, this is what I need. And I will tell you the first thing that drew me to it was simply what you see in the background is the over the shoulder look. And that was what I was really looking for. I wanted to, instead of, a lot of times when you're doing a screen share, you go into screen share mode and your slides take up the whole screen, and then you're just like a little teeny tiny block in the top right corner. And I wanted the focus sometimes needed to be on the screen share, but I wanted the focus to kind of be on like us feeling connected as an audience, because when you're live, that's how it is. Like, your slides are in the background behind you, but like your presence is there, and you can really feel that presence. So I was looking for that. And I was also just looking for an easier way, because how many times have we been in a meeting or something over Zoom and it's like, okay, let me press the screen share button. Okay, hold on while I go to share my screen. And, is my screen showing now? And I just didn't want those added steps. And I like to go back and forth between, this like over the shoulder look and then going full screen when sometimes I do need to do a demo. And so, again, was my absolute solution there, because now with a click of a button, I can just toggle between the two and I don't have to, start sharing, stop sharing, or any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you referenced sort of the in classroom experience. I'm curious, what do you think about for re-entry back into teaching back in classrooms, and how is the technology sort of shift that you've seen over the last couple of years going to inform the kind of in classroom experience going forward?
So to me, and this is another reason that I really appreciate because of the mission that you share, and that really resonates with me as a teacher and is part of like what I've tried to do also. And what that piece is how can we make the best use of face to face time in our classroom? That to me is the primary thing. When I started making videos and giving students the videos to watch for homework, so I flipped my classroom, and they would watch that before they walked into class. I was able to shift how class operated. So instead of like me going in with an agenda, I was really able to shift it to student owned learning, to addressing the needs of my learners that day. And it just really transformed the dynamic again to making the most use, the best, most meaningful use of class time. The video that students do for homework, to me, like that's background knowledge, but the biggest learning is always happening in my classroom. So even if I'm making videos that are full of content, to me, the most important part of the learning happens in the classroom when we're together, when we're working on things. I just feel like it can be more meaningful conversation time. And so, that to me is something, a really big shift that can happen when we're using technology in the right ways. um, to me, it's, sometimes I don't even use the technology in the classroom, and I'm using it more for the homework end so I can get more information from students. Sometimes I'll just use it for a quick warm up, so that I can see that real time nature of how everybody's doing. To me, it's really about the relationships we can build leveraging the tech tools.
Yeah, amazing. So speaking of relationships, I know that you also been using with family Zoom time. Can you say a little bit
Yeah.
more about that?
Yes, it. So we have a family Zoom. My sister has two young kids, and they actually live in San Francisco in California, and I'm all the way here in Maryland. And so we do a weekly family chat over Zoom, and I just like getting two little kids to sit in
Yeah,
front of a Zoom can be a lot. So before I started using in our family chat, sometimes it would be like I would get to see them for like 5, 10 minutes, and then they would be wandering off and doing something. And then when I started using it, it was just this element of fun. So like just like, the big hands, the hearts,
yeah,
and being able to change the background scene to something that they were interested in. I also make little like a little like a classroom teacher. I make a little agenda that we're going to go through, and it just helps them like get excited about it. Sometimes we'll play a game together. And again, I just use the over the shoulder there so that we can all still see each other and they can really still see me instead of, again, going into full screen share mode. Like, this is
Right.
our valuable time together. Yes, I want to get them engaged through the game, but like, I want to see them. Like, that's what I want to be focusing on. And so it's been really, really powerful for that and really nice for that.
Cool. Shifting gears a little bit, you are a published author. Tell us a little bit about Tech with Heart.
Yeah. So, it's really like I've been saying, to me, technology is a tool to help us connect with our students on new levels. Also, I think really importantly, student expression. How can students communicate with us? We have all different types of learners in our classroom. Speaking from my very personal experience, which I do a lot in the book and my personal journey, I'm very much that introverted student. I was a perfectionist in the classroom. And so feeling like I could raise my hand, speak on the spot was just not the format for me to always contribute to conversation. So a big thing that I talk about in the book and just that I talk about in general is like, how can we leverage these tech tools to empower every voice, to hear from all the different types of learners that we have in the classroom, to hear from all the different perspectives, like instead of just having one hand raiser or a robust conversation between a couple of students, like how can we see and hear from everybody in the room? All the answers can be projected anonymously, even using technology, and helping students become more comfortable and confident in sharing and learning how to express themselves. I think video here is really powerful too, in terms of giving students the ability to record in a place that they feel comfortable, the ability to record and re record until they have a shot that feels great to them. And again, like I think that building these connections with my students and giving them the reinforcement they need along the way helps them build the confidence they need, so that they can present in all different types of formats. But
Mhm.
again, to me, technology is just a tool to provide different platforms and different formats to allow every student's most powerful voice to shine.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, I wanna I want to also ask you. You've been teaching for you've been in the education space for 15 years, um, and we've seen such an explosion of technology in that decade and a half. And I'm curious what perspective you have, and maybe any sort of breakthrough moments or breakthrough stories that you've seen recently that help set up where students are going now, what students need, or even how students thrive now in a sort of technology centered curriculum, maybe compared to what you used to see you know in the early 2000s.
Yeah, so much has shifted, and so much has shifted about how students learn and how they're accessing information, right? I mean, in a world where a 5 minute TikTok is too long, it's really just a huge shift in attention spans and what we're used to. So, I think there's a lot of power in like the little micro learning. And we have to think about it. It can be very frustrating at times. I think something that was working before isn't working now because attention spans are shorter, or they're just used to, you know, this different type of way to take in information. I don't think that, like, I think that it's something we need to train our students to having a lot longer attention span. It's something we do a lot of work with as teachers, but also like, how can we leverage some of what students are doing in the world and seeing in the world around them to help them, to give them more opportunities to relate to the material, for them to find what applies to them and run with it and give them a little bit more creativity in terms of how they demonstrate their understanding. So even just like an assessment, that, when I went to school, the only way of assessing really was by taking a paper and pencil um, test. And to me, like, tech integration isn't about now making that paper and pencil test like on a computer so that it's easier to grade, or that students get faster feedback. That to me is like not an innovative use of technology. To me, it's more about like, okay, why don't I ask students to make a little video and explain, instead of giving them 15 problems to solve, maybe asking them to solve two and go deeper into it. And for me to assess them more on how they're processing that problem and how they're thinking through that problem and how they're verbalizing their understanding. I think the depth of type of activity that we can give students to do to, again, like, showcase their understanding is just transformed by these tech tools that we have, and really giving students that ability to express themselves creatively. And through that, again, we can get another lens on our student, get to know them in new ways. We talk a lot about culturally responsive teaching, and I think this is just like a super simple, like so simple of a way to allow students to tell you a bit about themselves, so that we can learn more about our students, that we can give them more relevant um, you know activities that they connect with. And I think that's just such an important component in that relational aspect, that teacher to student building trust. When we can build a trusting relationship with our students, I think that's our most important role as educators. Like, that's what really helps us help our students. Content is a small amount of what
Hmm.
we do as teachers.
And it sounds like maybe it's a subtle shift, but it sounds like it has big impact. The idea of shifting from technology as a sort of like way of delivering lesson plans or being a sort of administrative kind of infrastructure, to actually being like, no, the technology exists for the students to actually express themselves and to express what they understand and what they learn and what they know, as opposed to just being a kind of function of how you teach. Is that kind of, am I right there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Well, Stacey, we've we've covered a lot of ground, and this is a relatively short, interview that we're going to post online. But I want to, is it, if there's anything that you want to add or share, or anything additional that we should know about your teaching style, or about technology, or about, yeah, even, I'm all ears.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things to me is always sharing that, like, this has been my tech journey. And I think that I've been really successful with it because I really have embraced my style as a teacher, my strengths in my personality. And I always think that it's so important for me to express that, like, these are the things that have worked for me. But the reason that I think it's worked is because I always started with a problem before jumping into the solution. And as much as, like, I love geeking out to technology, I love beta testing new things. Like, you know what? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and I'm there for the run of it. Um, but I always start with, like, what is the problem in mind? So even when I'm looking at the technology tools and I'm seeing it, I don't adopt everything that I look at and I see and I even like. It has to really serve a purpose, and it has to be the time and space for it that year for me to really invest in it, for me to get myself comfortable with it, for me to get my students comfortable with it. But I do think that one of the messages that I'd like people to leave with is that, to me, again, like, the role of technology in many ways is that relational piece. It's allowed me to be a more compassionate teacher. It's allowed me to give every student a stronger voice in the classroom, all the different types of personalities that we have in the room. And it has allowed me to make the best use of face to face time that I possibly can. And so that to me is my biggest goal in sharing. with the world is, embrace your style and your strengths as a teacher, and then look to these tools as a piece of a solution. Everybody has something they want to work on in the classroom next year, and that's the fun thing about teaching is we always get to improve,
And
and every year we get to pick something new to work on. And so how can technology potentially be a piece of that solution? And I think one of the simplest ways to use honestly is to start out using it on the teacher end to present some lessons that students can watch at their own pace. Now, that can be in the classroom, that can be at home for homework. It can be used in a variety of ways. It doesn't have to be just for homework. But again, to me, that's giving students that ability to watch it at their own pace. You know what? Some of them are going to watch it at point 0.8 speed. Some of them are going to watch it at 1x, and some of them are going to watch it at 1.5x. And I've seen all of those things happen in my own classroom. And students can then rewind it, and they can rewatch it, and they can replay it when they need to. And I just think when we give students the resources they need, then they can really take ownership for their learning. And so that's like, that is preparing students to be really great thinkers and learners in the future.
yeah, that's amazing. I hadn't really thought about that, but in like your humanities classes and your literature classes, you can reread that poem again and again and again. Um, but when a math teacher is on the whiteboard, explaining how to factor binomials or whatever, you can't have them just do that over and over and over again. And one of the strengths of video is that ability to rewatch, replay. Um, Speed it up, slow it down until you really understand, so that you can then like be proficient in like that, that technique or that problem, and so makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also seen it used so well in our world languages classrooms too, for like, in terms of just like pronunciation. Sometimes you just have to hear that word played back over and over. And then for students to practice and to be able to hear themselves say it, and that they can have that practice, the simpler video can be, the more powerful it is. And that's where all these tools that were not available when I started making my videos in 2010, if I had had half of these tools, I mean, it was quite challenging to figure out even how to make the screencast, how where to host it online. Um, you know, so now all these things make it so much easier, and that is really important. Like, that ease of use for teachers and for students is very, very important. And to me, something that is important too is being able to write and talk at the same time. I think it's a very powerful instructional tool.